She would walk for hours alone. They watched her pass from place to place. I need to heal. I need a time of healing. And he said, if you want to find them, this is where to look. Nothing but a thin cloak. And the jewellery, it was different. It was a different colour. Believe in what you will. No one will judge you for it. Or will they? The island has this quality which makes it both a place where people live and work, and also it's a part of the spiritual world. What if your story was one which kept people guessing for years, searching for the truth? She would walk for hours alone, place to place. And as she turned her car onto that road, she started to drive. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories podcast. How are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. So, here we are, another episode. Now, in the last episode, I did some Scottish stories, and let me tell you this. People seem to really enjoy them. And I've always said, I will listen to the listeners when they tell me what they want. And, in this case, I can't ignore the numbers, right? When upwards of 17 people got in touch and demanded that I do more Scottish stories, I've just got to listen to those kind of numbers, So I've got some more Scottishness to share in this episode. I suppose I've got to watch slightly because there are quite a lot of very, very good Scottish history podcasts out there. I don't want them on at me complaining. And if you are interested in these sort of Scottish stories, there are a million documentaries out there on YouTube that you can find. My problem with them is, right, this is just between me and you. My problem is that all of these documentaries that you watch, they all get delivered in what I call the made up Scottish accent. It's a Scottish accent that doesn't exist. It's when people from Scotland talk like this. I'm talking about the borders of Scotland today, a great place of heritage. And you're like, nobody in Scotland has that accent. So where do these people come? Where do they get it from? News reporters or sometimes radio hosts. You're like, where have you made up that accent? I'm sure every country in the world has this as well. I'm pretty sure there must be lots of Australians and Americans and Canadians listening to this who go, yeah, we've got that too. It's the fake made up accent that's not actually from anywhere. Anyway, I don't want to offend those people, but that's just my feelings on that. Anyway, to the stories. So this week, I'm recording in my French chateau in the south of France. I'm in my little chalet near my vineyard, and the sun is setting as I settle down to tell some stories. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Iona is a Scottish island, a very small Scottish island, and it's up at the top of Scotland. And if you wanted to get there, you would need to take two ferries. Now, the island itself is only, get this, it's only 1.5 miles long by 3 miles wide. It is tiny, a tiny little Scottish island. It's got less than 200 people living on it. I think it's about 170 odd people live on it. Now, it's mostly known for two things. First of all, it's absolutely beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's set against some really kind of amazing views of water. Well, that's pretty obvious, I guess, because it's an island. But it's got some really stunning sort of cliff views and these gorgeous kind of stretches of land all around it, full of wildlife. Gorgeous scenery, right? Just absolutely beautiful. So, like I said, it's got a small population, but it's got this really nice community feeling. And I suppose the second thing that it's most kind of known for is that it has this reputation of being really tranquil, really peaceful. And it's a place that people will seek out, I guess, to go and relax. You can go and gather your thoughts there and restore yourself. The island of Iona, it's also known for, what will I call this? I'm going to call it its magical qualities. I don't know if magical is the right word. Maybe more mystical might be a better word. Mystical? I don't know. That makes it sound a bit like... I don't know, it makes it sound a bit shit. Anyway, it's always believed that this Scottish island is one of the places on earth where it's somehow possible to contact the spiritual world. That it's got this kind of thing about it where you're sort of between the physical world and the spiritual. Someone once said of it, it's the veil between the physical and the spiritual, the mortal and the immortal. It is almost transparent in the intensity of its pellucid skies and its religious history. Now, what is that religious history? Well, it is believed that this tiny, tiny island was the birthplace of Christianity in Scotland. And that's going to become important to this story. So generally, there's this idea that if you really wanted to connect with Scottish mythology, the place you'd go and do that is the island of Iona. From Iona, let's go to a different place. Somewhere else in the UK. London. London. In it, geezer. I'm a Londoner, right? London in 1920. This is where our story starts. There's a series of groups of people in London who believe that they have found their tribe, as the kids these days call it. Found their people, found the people that they should be connected with. And these groups are groups of occultists, people who believe in the occult, that there is more in this world than the physical life, and that there is a spiritual world to understand and connect with. And so, in amongst one of these London groups, we find a young lady, Miss Marie Emily Fornario, a half Italian, half English young woman living in London. And let me tell you, she was a believer in the occult. She was in her early 30s, unmarried, living in London with her parents' money. So she was living in a fairly nice house. She had a housekeeper. She was comfortable and she didn't have to work. So she would spend her time reading about the existence of spirits and fairies. and believing really that she had this purpose in life. And that was to get closer to the things that we couldn't see, the things that we just couldn't explain. Now, Marie went by the name Netta, and Netta was known to her friends and fellow occult believers to be quite hardcore in her belief. I mean, she so badly wanted to really experience everything that the occult beliefs could give her, could teach her. You know, she wanted to really be in the belly of the beast, as it were. She was really into this idea of where the physical and the spiritual worlds meet. So she would go to weekly meetings with other occultists, and they dabbled in magic and other practices. And there's one thing that Netta was really into, and that was telepathy. She loved this idea of tapping into people's thoughts. And more than that, she loved the idea that her own thoughts could be tapped into. For Netta, this was like boundless. Like, there was no limit to what can happen if your mind can be penetrated by telepathy, or if you can get into the minds of other people. Question for you. Would you like to be... What's the word? Telepathic? Yeah, would you like to be telepathic? To read the thoughts of others? I don't know. As I was thinking about this story, I was like, would I? Then I was like, no, I don't think I would. I think it's kind of creepy. What if you could? What if you could and the person sitting next to you on the bus was a serial killer? You could read their thoughts. I'd be like, I'm not sure. You can ponder that, mind reading. Get in touch and let me know your thoughts. See what I did there? Get in touch, let me know your thoughts. Honestly, I should write sitcoms. Right, so back to Netta. Well, she announces something to her friends in London which shocks them. She's going to leave London. She's going to go travelling to the island of Iona in Scotland to see what she can learn and she can experience. Now, our friends are like, Netta, babe, think about it. It's quite dangerous to go out, looking for all this occult stuff on your own if you don't really know what you're doing. But I don't think that's how Netta saw it. I think she saw it like she did know what she was doing, and she was perfectly independent and perfectly capable of going off and searching for things on her own. So, as much as our friends might have said, not sure that going to this tiny island in Scotland on your own is a good idea, Netta was like, laters, I'm packing up my bags and I'm out of here. So she tells her housekeeper that's where she's going, and she says she needs to go here because she needs to heal spiritually. And she needs to see for herself the existence of otherworldly beings. Netta packs up a bag, a hefty amount of belongings. I mean, she's not planning a short trip here. She is planning to go to Iona for a while. So she arrives on the island in September 1929. And first things first, when she gets there, she needs somewhere to stay. Now, there are a couple of guest houses on the island, but they're full. So she kind of wanders the streets with her suitcase and her belongings. And eventually she bumps into a woman called Mrs. McCrae. Now, Mrs. McCrae lives with her family. She's got her husband and her kids. And she meets Netta, and Netta says, I've just come from London. I'm on the island and I have nowhere to stay. And Mrs. McCrae says, you can come and stay with me and my family. We have a spare room. Now, when she arrives on the island, it's a bit of a thing of wonder. It is a very, very small population of people, as I said. So the residents are like, who's this? What's going on here? For a start, right, Netta has brought with her a very London look, some might say. she's wearing like big, long, fashionable black dresses, big hats, a staggering amount of silver jewellery, rings and necklaces, and she would wear this sort of symbol of the occult around her neck. And there's kind of photographs of her taken on Iona at the time, and she's got these wide eyes, quite sort of startled looking almost, looking at the camera. So she's very tall, she's got long curly hair, and she has, I don't know what it is, a really fascinating face. Don't know why, but you're sort of drawn to looking at her face. So you can imagine Netta arriving does make residents kind of go, who's this? Like, I mean, I'm just imagining Netta's walking around the island, bearing in mind it's only a mile long, and people are like, look at Netta, isn't she fabulous? Everyone's in like tartan shawls and kilts, and Netta's straight out of Vogue magazine with her London dresses, and everyone's like, oh my god, look at Netta. Anyway, very quickly she settles in, and she makes absolutely no bones about telling people why she's there. She wants to seek out the spiritual world, and she keeps on repeating this thing about, I need to heal, and I've heard that this is the island where I can do it. So at first people are like, okay, just let her get on with it, let her do what she wants, just we'll leave her alone and she can just carry on. So what she does is she gets herself familiar with the layout of Iona. She gets settled into the McCrae family home where she's staying, and she gets to know the kind of lay of the land, where things are. And even, as she's kind of going about her business and she's taking daily walks, if anyone raised an eyebrow, didn't bother Netta one little bit. She carried on regardless. So this is her kind of routine. By day, she explores the island, and it's said that there are certain parts where you're more likely to run into mystical fairies and meet with otherworldly spirits, so she would go there. And locals would talk about the fact that Netta walked the island from very early in the morning until dark every day, on her own, just walking, carrying a little book with her. No one quite knew what the book was, but that was Netta's business to carry this and read it. By night, Netta would return to the McCrae home. She would go to her room, and as the family put it, she would practice her magic. What this actually meant is that Netta would read up on occult practices and try to find ways to contact the spirit world. I don't know about you, but I see it like Netta sitting in her room with like candles lit, drawing symbols. There's like a breeze coming through the window, there's some curtains blowing. That's the vision I've got. I might be mixing it up with that terrible 90s film, The Craft. I'm not sure. So during this time that she's on Iona, Netta is sending letters back to London via her housekeeper. And she's done this since the day she arrived on the island. It's just letting everyone know she's okay and what she's up to. So like I said, she arrived in September and it's now late October. And she's going to send her housekeeper in October a letter which causes a bit of distress in London. Netta writes, I will be out of communication for some time. I have healing to work on, and it is all I can focus on. Do not expect any letters from me for some time. My healing is my priority. Okay. Now, when the housekeeper in London gets this, she shares this instantly with Netta's London friends, and they begin to grow a bit worried. And they start to question, should one of them go to Iona and check on Netta? But they decide against it. Let Netta do what she needs to do. There's a fear among her London friends that Netta was maybe too deep into the occult. She was almost obsessed with it, to a point where going to Iona and trying to convince her to come back to London probably wasn't going to work. So best just let her get on with it. So Mrs. McCrae, who she's staying with, she's watching Netta closely. And what she's starting to notice is that Netta can't seem to really sleep at night. She seems to be awake all hours of the day. Remember I said that Netta always wore jewellery, silver jewellery. Well, Mrs. McCrae notices something one day that really confuses her. As Netta's leaving the house one day, she notices that all of Netta's silver jewellery has turned black, as if it's somehow become tarnished or damaged. I'm talking like the earrings have gone black, the occult necklace has gone black, the bracelets. And when Mrs. McCrae says to her, Netta, what's happened to your jewellery? Netta says, oh, my jewellery always does this. Don't worry, it'll turn back to silver soon. So by now Netta's been on the island for 2 months. And these daily walks that she's going on, well, they've just become normal. No one really bats an eyelid anymore at Netta. She interacts with the locals. She tells them that she's on the search for evidence of pre-Christianity sites on the island. And people will tell her, well, this is where to go and look. You'll find this particular rock. Or rock, whatever. You'll find this particular thing. Now, after just 2 months and the letter saying that she would be out of touch, Mrs. McCrae comes home one day and is really alarmed to hear a lot of noise and a lot of business coming from Netta's room. And so when she enters, this is what she sees. Netta is packing up all of her belongings and announcing that she must return home now to London. When Mrs. McCrae asks why, Netta tells her she's being attacked telepathically by many beings, and she must leave the island before they damage her any further. Mrs. McCrae asks Netta for a bit more detail. What does she mean when she says she's being attacked telepathically? But Netta is really quite distressed. She's throwing belongings into the suitcase. She says she's leaving Iona. She won't be returning, as these attacks against her mind are just too much to bear. She came here to heal, and that's not happening. Now Mrs. McCrae says to her, it's a Sunday. There are no ferries on a Sunday. You won't be able to get off the island. But this doesn't stop Netta. So she goes to the ferry terminal and she waits. And it gets dark. And Mrs. McCrae is right. There are no ferries on a Sunday. So Netta returns with her suitcases. By now she's much calmer. And she says to Mrs. McCrae she's changed her mind and she will stay on the island after all. So she goes to her room that evening. Like I said, much calmer. And in the morning she sets off for one of her daily walks. This will be the last walk that Netta goes on. Although no one knows that at the time. Least of all, Netta. She says goodbye to the family as normal and she leaves. When the evening comes around, Netta hasn't returned, and the family begin to wonder what's happening. So they check her room. Possibly she came in and they didn't hear her coming home, but she's not in her room. Now, all of her belongings, they're all in the normal place. Nothing looks to be out of place. So they wait a bit longer. Then it gets to the late evening, and Netta still doesn't return home. So the family the following morning, they alert others on the island that Netta didn't come home, and so a group gather and they go looking for her. In pairs, locals walk the island looking for her, but there is no sight of her anywhere. People start to guess and wonder. They start thinking, has she been swept away into the sea? Has she fallen somewhere and hurt herself? Did she actually manage to get on a ferry and get off the island? But then she didn't take any of her belongings, so... Another day passes without any sight of her. So then the search gets bigger. More and more people from the island start looking for her. They split off and they form search parties. And they're looking round. And two men approach a large stretch of grass near the sea. And it's here that they find Netta. Netta is dead. And the scene is one which confuses everyone. Netta is wearing only a thin black cape tied around her neck. And her naked body is showing. She's lying on her back on the grass, on top of a large cross which has been carved into the grass. It is a huge cross, scored right into the earth, and Netta's dead body lies on top of it. She has in her hand a knife covered in grass and mud, which is believed to be the knife which carved that cross into the earth. Netta's body doesn't show any signs of harm. There's no bruising. There's nothing to say that she's been strangled. There's no head injury. And at first, the doctor who arrives on the scene is really confused. He looks closer. And as he does so, he sees some scratches, some deep scratches, and they're across the soles of Netta's feet. They're more like marks that have been cut into the soles of her feet. Now, Netta's body is moved. It's taken to the local church, whilst the doctor tries to figure out the cause of death. But he can't. There is nothing to indicate how Netta died. She hasn't been attacked in any visible way. There's no poison in her system. There's no evidence of heart failure. So a second doctor arrives on the island just to offer another opinion, take another look at Netta and try to reach a conclusion. But he can't pinpoint what the cause of her death is. So in this case, what they do is they look at the circumstances. She was found in the elements, wearing only a thin cloak, and so they determine that Netta died from exposure to the elements. This is not what anyone on the island believes. When the news of her death reaches her friends and her housekeeper in London, this is not what they believe either. Netta's death has never quite sat correctly within the theory that it was exposure to the elements. The belief is that Netta got herself too deep into the occult and that she meddled with forces that she shouldn't have meddled with. The clothes that Netta left for her walk that day wearing were never found. Where the cloak came from that she was found in, nobody knows where that cloak came from. The knife in her hand, that didn't belong to Netta, and no one recognised that knife. Later in that year, towards the end of December, Netta was buried in the graveyard on the island where her gravestone still is and can still be visited today. On that site, in that stretch of grass where they found her body, the islanders placed circles of stones, hundreds of large stones, in memory of Netta. They did this in 1929 and the stones are still there. They're still in the same circle. And when you're walking the island, you can see them. I'll end by saying that the island of Iona may have before had this reputation for being a place of mystery and perhaps a place where the physical and the spiritual world collide. But after the events of Netta Fornario in 1929, that belief only became stronger. And so ends the story of Netta. I find that story is so interesting, so bizarre. There's so many bits in it that you're like, what? What's this about being attacked through telepathy? Where did her clothes go? Where did the cloak come from? Who carved that cross into the ground? But that's why it's a mystery. That's why that story is so famous on that island. Because nobody knows what happened to Netta. Okay, so we will move on to the second story. And it's another mystery, but this time not connected to the spiritual world. I'm not going to over-explain or say a lot, I'm just going to get to the story. Christina Catherine MacDonald. I mean, could you get a more Scottish name? Christina Catherine MacDonald. I mean, that's as Scottish as it comes. So she was born in Inverness. Now, Inverness, if you don't know, is in the Highlands of Scotland. It's a kind of major player in the Scottish industry. It produces a lot of really good Scottish things which get traded overseas, good education system. It's a really thriving city. So we're in 1940, okay? Christina Catherine MacDonald, she's born into a family in Inverness who live in a council estate. And it's a fairly modest upbringing. I mean, I think it's really neither wealthy nor poor. And there's not really anything too startling to mention about her. Growing up, she went to school, that was fine. She took a job working at the local Boots the Chemist in Inverness as a young adult. And that was her life before meeting her husband. Now, her husband, when she meets him, she is in her early 20s, and he is a man called Gordon MacRae. And he is a wealthy businessman. He's a few years older. He's not much older, but he's a little bit older. He owned a really large building company in Inverness. And so, when they met, what this afforded them was a really comfortable lifestyle. You know, they could live in a nice house, they drove nice cars. Money wasn't really a problem because her husband owned this business. So when they first get married, it's all love and fairy tales and all that jazz. People really thinking, this is a couple who are truly in love. Look at them, they're going to last the distance, stay the course. This was not to be the case. A few years into their marriage, there are problems on the horizon. That initial spark that they had felt when they first met was beginning to disappear. Now, I introduced her as Christina because that's her name, but she went by Rennie. Rennie McCrae is what she went by. So Rennie and Gordon, although their marriage was in trouble, yes, there's no debating that, they did have 2 children together. They had 2 sons. One was 9 years old and one was 3. So the eldest is called Gordon and the youngest Andrew. So she had given birth, Rennie had given birth in 1973 to Andrew. Now, here is a very important part of the story. The youngest son in their marriage wasn't actually the husband, Gordon's son. Rennie had been having an affair for years, and the youngest child was a part of that affair. Whether or not her husband knew this, I don't know. I think he did, but there's no verification that at the time he actually knew that this wasn't his son. Even if he did, he still raised the youngest as it was his own. They still lived together, even though their marriage was dead in the water, basically. They still lived together in the family house. Rennie, husband Gordon, the 9-year-old, and the 3-year-old, which Rennie had with another man. Now, Rennie might have been having this affair, but so was her husband. Gordon was seeing his secretary. Like I said, the marriage just wasn't working and they'd both found other partners. Now, this is just to complicate things even further. The man that Rennie was having an affair with, who is called Bill McDowell, actually worked for her husband as the company secretary. Awkward. She's been seeing this man for 4 years and he works for her husband. But anyway, that's life, as they say. I don't know who says that, but I'm sure someone does. Well, the time comes when eventually Rennie and Gordon, they decide that they are going to separate. They both just admit the marriage isn't working. So they decide that they're going to go their separate ways. The plan is that Rennie will take the kids and will move to somewhere else in Inverness to live. Gordon doesn't know at this point that she's been having an affair. So he's just thinking, we're going to get divorced and she's just going to go and live with the kids somewhere else. Now, just to complicate it further, Bill McDowell, that Rennie is having the affair with, is also married at the time. So, I mean, it is an utter mess here. You've got 2 different marriages that are both falling apart. Anyway, Bill and Rennie, throughout their affair, they've been concocting a plan. This is their ultimate plan. It's to move away from the Inverness area and to live on the Scottish island of Shetland. They've been planning this for a while now. They both think, let's get out of here, get away from these marriages, and we can go and live together on this Scottish island and begin a new life. So obviously they're planning all of this in secret. Only one other person in the world knows this is happening, and that's Rennie's friend Valerie. So now that we know all of the players in the story, we can really get to the heart of actually what happened. And what happened takes place in November 1976. Gordon and Rennie have been split up for a little while. And Rennie announces that she's planning to go and visit her sister, who lives in Kilmarnock. Now, that's 200 miles away from Inverness, and you're kind of coming down from the top of Scotland, because like I said, Inverness is right up the top, so she's planning to drive to see her sister. You could do it in a day, I would say. It would take about 4 or 5 hours, but you can do this trip. Now, she's telling everyone that this is the plan. However, it's not. She's actually planning to drive and to secretly meet her lover, Bill McDowell. They have a secret rendezvous planned. So when they'd been carrying on their affair, the two of them, they'd done it through like a series of notes and letters. So they would like send each other these like sort of coded letters and notes to each other's like houses and places of work. You know, things that other people just wouldn't detect. Their other thing to do, and this will become important, is they would do the thing. Do you remember this is what people used to do when they had landlines? You would call someone and hang up after 2 rings on the phone. It was a way to communicate with each other. I think everyone did that. I mean, I know my family certainly did that. I'm assuming it wasn't just a Scottish thing. So, like, if you, or in fact, me and my friends used to do it. Yeah, if you'd been out, right, and you'd gotten, say, the train or the bus back and it was like really late at night, rather than actually call someone to say you'd got home safely, someone would say, "Give me 2 rings." And that's what you would do. You would just like dial their number and then hang up after 2 rings. Now I think about it, what a weird mode of communication that was. But I suppose we didn't really have any else at the time, did we? So it's all set. She would tell everyone she's going to see her sister, but secretly she was driving to meet Bill. So on this day, these are her movements. She drops her 9-year-old son off at her husband's office about 5 o'clock. She keeps 3-year-old Andrew with her. Obviously, he's only 3. He's quite young. So she thinks, I better just take him with me. And so, she sets out on the A9. The A9 is a major motorway. It often gets called the spine of Scotland. It sort of connects like the top of Scotland where Rennie was right down to the central belt of Scotland, and it's one of the busiest roads. Now, in case you're thinking, why the hell is Betty telling me about a motorway? I don't care. The motorway is going to become important. Now, as I said, the McRaes were wealthy, and Rennie is driving a BMW, a pretty posh one. So it's quite a visible car that she's in, and so a few different people see her leaving Inverness and getting on to the A9 motorway around about 5:30 that evening. An hour or so later, the car is seen pulling into a lay-by at the side of the motorway, and at least 3 other cars can say that they saw Rennie's car parked here by the side of the road. Now, when they're asked for further details, they will say this. The car engine was turned off and the car was empty. Now, it's getting dark by this time, so how are these people so sure that it was definitely empty is questioned, but they'll say, no, I guarantee The car was empty. Neither Rennie nor 3-year-old Andrew were in the car when it was parked at the side of the motorway. By 8:30 that night, the car is gone. At 9:30, an hour later, on that same evening, a bus driver is driving his bus into the Perth area of Scotland. And let me just say, if you were going anywhere from the top of Scotland to the Central Belt, you would more than likely come through Perth. He's driving his bus through Perth and he sees down this little side road from his bus. A little side road that nobody would ever really have any need to go down. He sees the flickering of some lights, or at first what he thinks are lights. So he slows the bus down and he's looking at it and he's thinking, what the hell is that? And then he realises it's not light, it's fire. So he stops the bus, he gets out and he goes to have a look. And in that dark little road, he finds a car and it's fully burning. Smoke and flames everywhere. So he calls the police to alert them and the police arrive. Police look at this and they can make out the license plate. So they take the license plate, they enter it into their system and it's traced to a Mr. Gordon McRae of Inverness, Rennie's husband. So police contact him and he says, yeah, that is my car, but my wife was driving it. She was heading towards her sister's for a visit and she had 3-year-old Andrew on the trip. Well, police tell him there's no sign of Rennie or Andrew. What we've got here is just a car on fire. When the fire is put out, the police search it and they find in the back a rug. And it's pretty badly burned, but they can make out that the rug has a dark patch on it. And that is a dark patch of blood. And when it's tested, it's discovered that this blood belongs to Rennie. So police realise now what they have here is they have a potential murder case. And they have to work fast. So this is where they get those statements from people who saw the car parked in the lay-by at the side of the motorway. And this is where they discover that she actually wasn't going to her sister's. She was actually going to meet the man she was having an affair with, Bill McDowell. And the plot thickens. But now at least, the one good thing is that we all know the same information. So the day after the burning car has been found, the area is searched by 100 police officers and there is not a single shred of anything to point them in the direction of the missing mother and child. Weird, weird, weird. I've said it before. I'll say it again. People don't just vanish. They don't. People do not just disappear. They don't just disappear into thin air. They don't. People just don't up and vanish. So, what the hell has happened here? Interviews begin with everyone and anyone who passed the area that night or who was nearby. One thing comes to light out of it which is very peculiar. One witness says they saw the car in the road that it was found in where it was on fire. They saw the car, but they assumed that it belonged to a local farmer because they'd seen someone removing a sheep from the car earlier in the evening. A sheep. How strange. So police sit for ages with this sheep theory, and they're like, why would there be a sheep in the car? This doesn't make any sense. And then they discover the day that she disappeared, Rennie McCrae was wearing a sheepskin jacket. Is that potentially what this passerby is talking about? So police are like, well, let's pop that one in the back burner because we don't really know much about Sheepgate at the moment. We'll pop that one back there. So the search continues, and it grows to nearly 300 police, and by now Army Reserve officers are brought in to search the area, and they start digging up parts of the area around where the car has been found. Obviously what they're looking for here is bodies. They're looking to see, will they find these bodies? Will they show up? Back in Inverness, the investigation has uncovered everything to do with the affair with Bill McDowell. By now, the husband is fully aware that his wife had been having this affair for all these years. Now, they go to Bill. He's suspect number one in this case. They go to Bill and they question him. But he has an alibi. He was with his wife the whole evening. Police ask him, had he planned to meet Rennie? He says, no, that was never in the plans. Somebody's not telling the truth. Then this happens, and this bit sticks out like a sore thumb. A week after the disappearance, Bill McDowell turns up at the police headquarters in Inverness and decides he wants to make a voluntary statement and tell the police all he knows and remove himself, basically, from the case. So police are like, fine, we're here, we're ready to listen. And that's when they learn about this phone system that the two of them used to use, this 2 rings on the phone. And Bill says this, it's been happening every night since she disappeared. And I think she's alive and that she's trying to communicate with me. Now that's obviously very interesting for police. So they settle in to hear more from Bill McDowell when 2 seconds later his wife arrives at the police station and she drags him out. She tells him there and then, stop talking to police. Now, he's there voluntarily, so police can't make him stay. So his wife, she drags him away, and that's the end of Bill talking to the police. Of course, Bill stays high on the suspect list. But there's not enough there for police to be able to really do anything. Her husband, Gordon, of course, he is also investigated. Did he do something in a fit of rage to punish her for their marriage? Police are looking at lots of different things, but actually they rule him out quite quickly. He had an alibi on the night that Rennie and Andrew disappeared, and he seems genuinely distressed that his estranged wife and child are missing. In fact, he puts up a lot of money as a reward for any information. So, time passes. The case continues to baffle everyone. Where can Rennie and Andrew be? Just over a week into the investigation, 2 men come forward with yet another bit of bizarre information. These 2 men are currently employed by the local council, and they're working on resurfacing a bit of the A9 motorway. And they're doing that while all of this is happening. So these 2 men, right, Just two guys at their work, just doing their work, minding their own business. They finish up for the night around about 6 o'clock one night. They go, right, tools down, time to go home, we'll come back tomorrow. When they come back to the work the next day, the digger that they use to dig up the road has been moved in the middle of the night, and the section of the road that they were working on had been, as they put it, resurfaced by an amateur. Someone had had a really good go at digging up a bit of the road on that motorway in the middle of the night. They'd used the massive digger, tried to cover it up, but they'd made a right pig's ear of it. They'd made a right mess of covering it up. So these two guys get to their work and they're like, what the hell is this mess? What's going on here? So they call police. Police come out. They do a little digging, but they don't really find anything at first. Then they dig deeper. When they go a little bit deeper, they find some bits of metal that are under the road. The two guys who work there say, don't remember those bits of metal being there, don't recognise them at all. Now, police suspect, but they can't be 100% sure, that these two bits of metal, they could be parts of a pram belonging to Andrew, but they can't say for sure. So this part of the story, and the fact that it's been going on for a few weeks now, this means that every crackerjack in the land comes forward with their theory. Everyone's got a theory on what happened to Rennie. None of it of any use to police. You know, they get reports that she's been spotted in London. So they follow it up. Can they find her? No. Someone says, I saw her on a train. Right, fine. They check. No, okay, that doesn't lead them anywhere. Someone says, oh, I saw her walking by the side of the motorway. No one else witnessed that, so this one person's account of that just sort of disappears. Then one of those people come forward, I don't mean to laugh, but what do you call them? Is it a diviner? You know the people who have, no offence if this is you and if you believe in this, I'm not laughing at it, I just don't quite get it. You know the people that have got the stick, right? And it's got like the point on it and you hold, and then it's sort of got two wee bits that stick out and the stick is supposed to point you towards something. So like, I don't know, is it, I think it's water, is it? Like if you're divining, is that what you call it? Divining for water? So I don't know what I'm talking about. I think it's very clear I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think you do know what I mean. It's the thing where, you like point it to the ground and it's meant to show you water or something. I don't know. Anyway, this guy who calls himself a diviner comes forward with his stick. And he's like pointing it all around the area. And he says that his stick draws him towards this bit of the motorway, the bit where the road has been resurfaced. He says, there's something there. There's something there you have to look at. There's something there you need to see. Police say, well, we looked. We did, and all we found was two bits of metal. So, thanks very much for your time, but if you wouldn't mind just taking your stick, going back home and just playing with it yourself. Now, a few months pass. The search continues, and there are TV appeals, news reports, more and more money is being put into the search, and the search for Rennie and Andrew becomes the largest ever search in Scotland. By now we are talking thousands of people are searching for these two. And of course, every avenue is covered. Did she run away? Did she commit some sort of murder-suicide? In the process of looking for them, rivers are dragged, forests are searched, every train and bus company are made to hand over their footage to see if she got onto public transport. Bill McDowell is questioned one more time, and while he remains really high on the police list, they still can't quite pin it on him. Months pass, years pass, and the mystery of what happened remains just that, a mystery. The case goes cold and unsolved. Then in 2004, a TV show in the UK airs a special about the case, and it suddenly brings it back into the public eye 28 years after it happened. And with this kind of renewed attention, police announce that they are undertaking a massive new search for Rennie and Andrew. And what they're going to do is they're going to search a quarry near where the car was found. Now, this quarry is massive. It's surrounded by 2,000 trees. And police decide they're going to spend £150,000 to drain the quarry and use state-of-the-art thermal imaging equipment to see if they can find these bodies. So the 2,000 trees are removed, the equipment goes down, the 2,000 trees are removed, the quarry is drained, and the equipment is used. It doesn't reveal bodies. No bodies to be found, but they do find more bits of metal. Perhaps more of the pram belonging to 3-year-old Andrew. Now, this case is old. Very old. And it's so interesting because it just doesn't go away. And in 1 second, I'm going to bring you right up to date with where we are now. The fact that it doesn't go away really intrigues me. By 2016, there was nearly £500,000 spent by Scottish police on this case. And there seems to be this feeling from the public that police must have some kind of information. They must have something that they're working with, or they wouldn't just keep at this case. To mark the 40th anniversary of the disappearance, police hold a press conference to appeal for new information. And after 40 years, some brand new information comes to light. A man who has not yet been mentioned in this story suddenly becomes very important to police. This is a man that they questioned the day after Rennie and Andrew disappeared. This man's name, we don't know. However, this man had been questioned, so police must have thought he might have some kind of connection, or he might know something. But they questioned him the day after. They let him go. And as soon as they let him go, this man fled to America. And he lived in America for 40 years. He only returned to Scotland when he was due to die. And by now this man is dead. And police only ever had that one conversation with him, and then the following day he was gone for 40 years, and now there's no chance on following that up. So that brings us up to 2019, when all of the people involved have been repeatedly questioned. But it would seem that police are still intent on investigating this. Now here's what we do know. In 2019, police arrived at the home of Bill McDowell, Rennie's lover from all those years ago, the original suspect, and they arrested him. They charged him with the murder of Rennie and Andrew. Bill McDowell, in his 80s, went to court last year. Details of what evidence police have is locked up tight. It's hidden away, but there's something. Enough to arrest the man that they always thought it was. Bill McDowell is currently out on bail and awaiting trial for the double murders. And as soon as I know any more, I can let you know. Because I would love to know what happened to Rennie and Andrew that night. The belief held by most people, and the one that's lasted the longest over the years, is that if you want to find those bodies, you need to go back to that motorway, back to the spine of Scotland. Because I might have laughed at that man earlier with his stick, the diviner, but maybe he was right. Maybe those two workmen, that following day when they came back and that piece of road had been dug up in the night, maybe, just maybe, police missed it. Or are they somewhere else? I don't know. But what I do know is that the case of Rennie and Andrew McRae is the longest running UK search for any missing people. And so ends the story. Well then, there you go. Hope you enjoyed those. 2 little stories for you there. Yeah. Puzzlers, thinkers, any theories, get in touch. Let me know your thoughts. Yeah, that's been my little trip round some Scottish things. Don't know if I'll do another Scottish-y, but I might. There's plenty of other stories. I don't know. We shall see what happens, whether I do or whether I don't. In the meantime, you know what to do. Get in touch, say hello, join the Facebook group. Be lovely to see you over there. Get in on the chat, get in on the laughs. Yeah. What else to say? Don't know. I've got another one of those. I feel like I've got something to say, but I don't. Yeah, guess I don't. So until the next episode, I hope that you are well. Stay safe. Love you. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.